Yes, thank you again.
It's my pleasure now to introduce our next speaker. Hugh Williams is the president of Impact Public Affairs, a firm that specializes in government and media relations. With extensive experience in print and broadcast media, Hugh has appeared frequently as a spokesperson on CBC and CTV. Hugh's government experience is diverse, having served as Chief of Staff to the Deputy Minister of Canada, as Senior Special Assistant to the Minister of Constitutional Affairs, and as Legislative Assistant to the Speaker of the Alberta Legislative Assembly. Hugh authored a government relations guide for directors of nonprofit organizations and other documents, all of which I've read, for the Canadian Society of Association Executives, CSAE. He's also served on the board of directors for the Government Relations Institute of Canada. Hugh has an MBA from the University of Ottawa and a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from the University of Calgary. He's also completed studies at the Université de Tours in France, and is fully bilingual. Hugh and his team have had a relationship with HRAI for about the past 5 years. And Hugh will now enlighten and delight us all with his take on the election that just happened, what it was about, and what it might ultimately mean for Canadians and our industry. With that, I'm happy to introduce Hugh Williams. Hugh, can you turn your mic and video on?
Yeah, I think you have me now. Just a quick check. Perfect.
We've got you. Thanks.
Great. So, and I assume you can see my slides by what I see on the screen here. So thank you for having me, Martin. Quick thank you right off the top to Rob as the outgoing chair, and to Sandy and the whole team for their leadership. I think one of the things that HRAI has done really well during this period of time, during the pandemic and whatnot, is kept moving the ball forward. We really saw from Philippe's presentation, the kind of dialogue that's going on between the private sector, between specialized climate change consultants and government. These are the kind of presentations that senior officials, boards of different utilities are dealing with, and it sets the table for all of the policy decisions that we've seen coming out of government. And during this pandemic, there's a lot of associations who retrenched, had the challenges that made them look inward as opposed to outward. And I think HRAI has really done a good job of looking forward and continuing to charge forward on the advocacy front. The first thing I'm going to touch on today is really the importance of the election results and what that means. I'm going to talk a little bit about the advocacy team of HRAI in action, talk about some of the post-election things, and then move to the opportunities and challenges, which I think are quite significant. And to start off with, I wanted to give you some visuals with respect to what the election really looked like. Some MPs that I've talked to have referred to this as Groundhog Day because we essentially had a 36-day election campaign that delivered almost an identical House going forward. You can see that the Liberals came back short of the 170 majority with 158 seats, and most of the other parties were plus or minus 1 seat. But visually, I wanted to put up the colors there for you so you can see how the mix of the House lands. The Liberals, of course, maintain government. The Conservatives have a strong majority position, and their dance partners for the Liberals to get anything done are that teal color or that orange color of the NDP. So I can't think of an election over the 30 years that I've been in Ottawa, involved in politics directly, where you've had such a repeat scenario as this, and even right down to the fact that there's very little changeover in terms of the MPs. Usually you get a change of an election, and there's quite a bit of turnover. There were some significant losses at the cabinet level of 4 female cabinet ministers who either didn't run, or 3 that lost their seats. That's obviously going to be a factor that's a challenge for the Prime Minister. But by and large, all of the hard work that HRAI has done in the background really allows us to deal with those returning MPs without having to start at first base with them. We're well down into rounding third, so they understand the challenges that we're about, and they understand where HRAI comes to in terms of solution. Just a quick snapshot in terms of the provinces. You can really see that the Liberals ran up the numbers in Ontario. That's where their victory came from. The Ontario caucus will have a huge say in terms of how the government's policy moves forward. Quebec as well will be at the table with delivering seats. The other provinces are going to be just a little bit more of a challenge for those Liberal MPs to find their voice. Again, this slide, I just wanted to let you the popular vote kind of sink in. First of all, early indications from Elections Canada are that the number of Canadians who voted was significantly down, around 59%. People stayed home. That's down quite significantly from usually the high 60s. That would have affected certainly some of the popular votes. But this is again the second election in a row, and that's never happened in Canadian history, where a party won the popular vote, the Conservatives, but did not take government. So again, the first time in Canadian history that you've had back-to-back minority governments where the government in power did not have the majority of Canadians behind them. And again, I think that will impact the tenor of the House going forward. Just to talk a little bit about those pluses and minuses, you can see the Conservatives -2 seats, the Liberals up 1 seat, the Bloc up 2 seats, and the New Democrats, +1, and then the other parties, similar kind of results. So I think what's important to consider about this is that the mood of things when the leaders set a little bit of the tone. I'll come back to that in a second. But geographically, you've got a challenge. If you look at this map here, you'll see, the Liberal victories are marked in red. And if you're looking at a map of Canada, you might be, well, how did they maintain government? Because you can barely see any of the red there. Certainly, you can see the power base of the Conservatives out west, BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, some seats in Southern Ontario and Atlantic Canada. But there's a real hidden context for where the Liberals succeeded. And I think that the GTA is probably the best way to describe it. This is a snapshot of the ridings in and around Greater Toronto area. It's Fortress Toronto for the Liberals, Fortress Trudeau for the Liberals. There's 53 ridings in there that went solidly Liberal, where the Conservatives just couldn't break through. And the other way to look at it is, Team Trudeau couldn't get beyond the center. And if I showed you slides of Vancouver and of Montreal, they would be very similar. So really the Trudeau government's ability to come back and hold power is all about what they did in Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver. And in some ways, that really sets the mood of where leadership is here. I can tell you from talking regularly to people who were on the leaders tour for the Liberals, the mood in the first few weeks of the campaign was, rattled, discombobulated. What's gone wrong? They started the campaign with a 7-point lead over Aaron O'Toole, and Aaron O'Toole, was virtually unknown, particularly amongst Canadians under 35. He ranked the 4th choice, or not at all, for those under 35. So to start with that kind of a lead and then see that evaporate after 3 weeks of the campaign was rattling for the Prime Minister's team. But full credit to the Prime Minister, and much like his boxing debut against Senator Brazeau, despite getting pummeled in the first few rounds of the election campaign, he came back very strongly, rallied his team, pulled them around together. They looked at the MPs who were in that Greater Toronto area, not quite the core of Toronto, really thought they were going to lose their seats, but they were very pleased that the Prime Minister was able to pull them all together. So, there was a lot of talk amongst MPs during the campaign, Liberal MPs, or leading up to it in private conversations. And if they're talking to me about it, they're talking openly amongst themselves, that that maybe Trudeau was a drag on their party and they needed to make a change. Since the election, I can tell you that the conversations are exactly the opposite. They appreciate the fact that the Prime Minister pulled them together, the Liberal leader pulled them together and got them over the goal line. And in fact, they credit him with the victory. The results that he pulled in the GTA, the results that he pulled in Vancouver and Montreal delivered this campaign victory. The O'Toole campaign is, I think it deserves a lot of credit for how they connected with the voters. He tried to drive the party much closer to the center. He ran for the leadership on the right wing of the party and then pulled radically towards the center, and produced basically the same result as Andrew Scheer did in the most recent election. Andrew Scheer, of course, was booted, and we've seen the knives come out very early for Mr. O'Toole. Last night on the major networks, they had members of the Conservative executive talking about how that, you know, the pull to the left was kind of a betrayal. In fact, they used the word betrayal, and you can see that the Conservatives have a history of win or go home, and we'll see whether Mr. O'Toole survives this. He's got to certainly put all his energies into staying alive. Mr. Singh, perhaps the most interesting case of all, Thomas Mulcair in the 2015 election delivered, I think, 99 seats. Or took it from 99 seats to 44 seats, excuse me. So he delivered 44 seats in that election, and they dumped him as leader. Jagmeet Singh has been at 25 seats for the last 2 elections, and has maintained his seat. And all of the spin coming out of the executive and leadership of the NDP is that they are not looking to make a change whatsoever. One of the factors, of course, for the NDP is they spent a ton of money in this election. They mortgaged their building in downtown Ottawa here. I'm overlooking Parliament Hill, and you can see that they really spent a lot of money with very little results. That's a problem for them. And of course, the path to a future majority for any government runs through Quebec, and with Mr. Yves-François Blanchet in a position to hold as many seats as he does, 32 seats. That really puts the emphasis on one of the parties has to break through in Quebec, or we're going to be in a sustained period of minority governments for decades to come. Quickly on some of the fringe parties, I think with all the emphasis on the environment, the fact that that we had the wildfires we had all the climate change emergencies that have been so much in the news, and certainly Philippe talked about them from a Dunsky perspective. But if you can't manufacture support around the Green Party to deliver seats, particularly your own seat as a leader, the future of the Green Party as a movement, as a party, I think is really at risk, particularly because all of the main parties, the Conservatives being most notable, have moved to a climate change agenda and a responsible application of that. Maxime Bernier, whom I knew well as a cabinet minister, he's run this fringe movement. They cost the Conservatives probably 8 or 9 seats in Ontario, maybe a couple of seats out west when you do the one riding by riding breakdowns. And he's just an individual who I think is going to stick around. He took his bat and ball and went home from the Conservative Party and really is struck out on a libertarian path. And I think that is going to be one of the major challenges for the Conservatives going forward if that movement continues to grow. So in the midst of all this, I think you should be very proud as members that HRAI had a very proactive advocacy push in the lead up to Parliament Hill. The election, I should say. Lots of outreach for the virtual Parliament Hill days, and it's nice to see some of those members get elected. We have Mark Soray, who I was just in his riding, who is a Liberal. He was the Natural Resources Parliamentary Secretary at the time, meeting with HRI members and leadership. Brad Weiss from Saskatchewan, of course, was a critic for natural resource issues, and again, we had a pre-budget submission. Meetings with the research teams of all the committees, and meeting with the policy staff, really pushing the agenda prior to the election, which I think was really important. And then during the election, not to miss a beat. And again, historically and even still today, most associations, down tools during an election. And I think, Martin deserves a lot of credit for, being proactive and saying, no, we're going to meet candidates and give candidates an opportunity to tour facilities. A couple of notable, Stephen Ellis in Nova Scotia, Cumberland, Colchester, really had the opportunity to tour a member facility and unseated a conservative, unseated the Liberal MP, Madame Zan there. So it's a good example of talking to candidates before they're in office is, really provides an opportunity to make sure they listen to you when they're in office. And similarly on the Liberal side, you had John Aldick who defeated a Conservative incumbent, tour a facility out in Cloverdale, Langley in the BC way. So post-election, team's very busy congratulating new MPs, re-electing MPs, making sure that they know that we have a vision and that we're good partners at the table. And as they're getting briefed on climate change and visioning plans for climate change, we're making sure to produce a map of HRA champions and potential champions, monitoring the formation of the government, which I think is going to come back from all of the MPs and officials that I'm talking to in the last couple of days, come back relatively soon, sooner than normal because of the transition of government. We've got to be involved and make sure that HRA is at the table with the future work of climate change committee works, the new cabinet, and of course, one of the most important elements that HRA has really brought to the table and is expanding is that grassroots network, talking to folks locally. The opportunities on the agenda, and I think it's interesting. Philippe talked about a million year time frame. I'm really talking about the last 36 days and what the future is going to look like. But I think there's a very strong fit there, in terms of opportunities. The building and retrofits and energy efficiency upgrades. The Liberals have committed to launching a new national net zero emissions building strategy, and we have to be part of that, have to be part of building that, have to be part of making sure that the burden of this massive transition that Mr. Dunsky spoke about is not done on the backs of industry, but we have the full support and partnership of government in terms of financing and direction. That includes home upgrades. The Liberals will continue with the Canada Green Homes Grant. HRAI is right at the table and engaged with government on that. And again, if you're not at the table, you're generally on the menu. So we're really well positioned there. And of course, workforce development will continue to be an issue, as all industries have shortages, but the Canada Apprenticeship Services Program workforce development is a priority for the Liberals, and something that meets well with HRAI's objectives. So challenges. I think you can't go into this period of time without really recognizing some of the government challenges and how they could impact HRAI and our mission. Number one is the huge debt that's been taken on over the pandemic period of time. There'll be there's a whole task force at finance trying to figure out how they get that revenue generation back. So anybody who's in business has to be concerned about what that tax structure looks like. So HRAI will be at the table making sure that those taxes don't unduly impact our sector. You also have a short window of government, 18 months. It doesn't land for the is the average length of a minority parliament. And the problem you really have with that is that it's tough to plan big picture horizons to deal with these challenges of transition of the economy in 18 months segments. And there's an upgraded power to the NDP and the Bloc, which I think is going to keep the Liberals in check, but it makes everything more complicated. Committees, votes in the House of Commons, getting policy things done, makes for busy advocacy where we've got to be talking to the NDP, the Bloc, and the Liberals for any initiative that we want to move forward and be partners on. So that's really the presentation in a nutshell. Happy to take questions or just catch us up on time if Sandy wants to jump in.